Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for carving out a few hours of your summer vacation to have a special council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order, and first item of business is to ask if anybody has any items on this agenda on which they want to declare a pecuniary or a conflict of interest. I see none, so we'll move ahead. I'll call, the agenda has been just a little bit amended as we've gone through here, so Lana has kindly posted the most recent part of the agenda up on the screen there, so if that meets with your approval, I'll ask that somebody move to amend the agenda. Councillor Lloyd moves the amended agenda. All in favor? That was unanimous, thank you. And so then we don't have any meeting minutes to adopt, so we'll move right into the 4.1. Welcome, Cam.
Thank you. Okay, so item 4.1 on the agenda is the review of the legal opinion on prohibition of cannabis and an update on the timeline for further issues relating to cannabis regulation. Council at our last meeting was provided with a legal opinion that was secured from a legal firm with expertise in both the regulation of cannabis and municipal law generally. It was provided to Council at that point, and Council has had the opportunity to consider the implications of that opinion. We had previously brought forward a draft bylaw regulating the consumption of cannabis within town. We will need to bring something similar forward at some point in the near future. The staff report provides for a timeline of what is anticipated with respect to bylaws concerning both the regulation of cannabis consumption as well as amendments to the land use bylaw, which will be required to regulate the ultimately the sales of cannabis and the establishment of retail stores within town. Some highlights for that: we do have an October 17th timeline for the anticipation of legalization of cannabis within Canada. So with that date in mind, we've provided an overview of the assumption for these various bylaws with respect, of course, taken for the need to advertise and that sort of thing. The September 4th regular meeting of Council will be preparing first reading for both the consumption and land use bylaw amendments that will be required. Following that, we've discussed, back in February, Council approved a public engagement strategy for cannabis that contemplated the concept of a public open house prior to further presentation of the bylaw. With that in mind, that would need to take place the week of September 10th. Following that, that would give administration some time to reflect on what was taken out of that meeting, and presentation of those findings would be at the September 24th meeting, which would allow for second and third reading of the bylaws along with a public hearing to occur at the October 9th meeting. Should Council wish to alter that timeline at all, now would be the appropriate time to direct administration as such. With respect to what will be presented, now of course the bylaws will be open for debate and amendment and that sort of thing, as all bylaws are. However, it is administration's preference to bring forward a bylaw that is in line with Council's expectations, if that's at all possible. So one of the things we're looking for here as administration is some direction with respect to where Council would like to see the draft bylaws with respect to both consumption and land use, and with respect to how or to what degree council would like to see the town regulate on both these issues. So at that point, I would ask if council has any questions on that or any discussion.
Any questions through the cam? Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one question, I guess, is with these timelines that we have, are we putting any potential businesses at a disadvantage here in Coaldale if we hold off and moving first and second and third reading prior to even September? If we were to move forward and allow cannabis retail shops in Coaldale, I would hate to have them at a disadvantage of places in Tabor, Picture Butte, Lethbridge, Raymond, all the way around us, and put a business that may come to Coaldale and have tax implications, business implications, et cetera, in the town at a disadvantage and go someplace else and not look at Coaldale as a potential site.
Well, I guess with respect to that, given the council calendar that we have in front of us, this is functionally the fastest we could see adoption, unless, of course, we looked at 3 readings in a single sitting for any of this. Just given the requirements to advertise and things like that at this point, September 4th is the earliest next scheduled council meeting. Following that, depending on how we advertise and such, early October is realistically the quickest turnaround for that. Whether or not that would impede a business owner, I believe your question is with respect to their ability to, say, for example, land use bylaw amendments occur at the October 9th meeting, which allow for stores to open in one form or another in town. Following that, the processing of development permits and such, and then ultimately for a business owner to take those permits and apply to the AGLC and the requisite provincial bodies in order to be granted a license to operate. There is I suppose, the potential for some slowdown for them relative to other municipalities, though that would really depend on sort of a case-by-case basis.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Cam, for your presentation and getting the legal opinion for us. I'm going back to the enforcement of the bylaw. Have we had any consultation with Solgen on what our authority is going to be for our peace officers, because RCMP don't enforce bylaws, and how what's their authority to enforce this type of bylaw once we enact it? Because I just don't clearly understand what their ability is going to be as a peace officer. Is it going to be put into their mandate, or provincially or federally? Because they're employed municipally.
Okay. Sorry, so was your question with respect to the enforcement of the cannabis consumption bylaw?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, that bylaw is like any other. So we have, for example, I believe it's the tobacco reduction bylaw in the town of Coaldale, which provides for a means for a peace officer to issue fines and that sort of thing for consumption of tobacco in a place where it is prohibited. So the cannabis consumption bylaw would be along the same lines. It's simply a matter of issuing fines and tickets and that sort of thing. And we've received no indication that that's going to be something that isn't possible to do at the local level.
Okay, thank you.
CEO Hastings?
Just a further point to Mr. Mills there. Like other bylaws, the Petty Trespass Act, for example, we may need to apply to the Solgen to have additional authorities added to their mandate. That's something we may have to look into, but there are certain bylaws that you do have to receive specific permission from Solgen to have that added to their authorities locally.
We have the report in front of us, and that's prepared, and we've been discussing this, so I'm willing to entertain any motions that council wishes to bring forward. Counselor Simpson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion for 1, 2, and 3.
We have a motion by Counselor Simpson with regards to the recommendation items 1, 2, and 3. Any discussion? Counselor Holm?
Wondering why recommendation 4 is not included in this, that we recommend that they prepare the bylaws for establishment of retail cannabis stores as well. I'd like to have that added as a friendly amendment.
Counselor Simpson?
No, I wouldn't add that in. I would keep it as prohibiting the sale of cannabis in Coaldale. I've talked to many business owners and they don't really want a cannabis store next to them, so it's going to be hard to find a location.
Counselor Holm?
Against that, I don't think it's up to our business owners, existing business owners, to determine who gets to locate next to them. I believe that is up to this council, and it is up to the town bylaws to set the standards. And if somebody finds a location that meets the standards and meets the bylaws that we put forward, then that new owner should have every right to publicly be engaged and to establish where they want. I don't think it's up to another flower shop to say, gee, I don't want to have another flower shop next door to me. I don't believe that that is why we set up a town and why we have business in town, that the business owner should be able to limit that.
Okay, I think number 4 wouldn't be friendly because I think that's contrary to what number 3 is already saying. So, but maybe what I'll recommend is that we divide the question and tackle each of the points that Councillor Simpson has put forward separately. So, unless there's other discussion, I'll take any questions on item number 1. So I'll call the question for point number 1. All in favor? Okay, and then with regard to point recommendation number 2, is there any discussion regarding recommendation number 2? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of number 2? And is there any opposed? Okay, Councillor Avery is opposed. And then with respect to item number 3, is there any discussion on item number 3? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of item number 3? And opposed? Councillor Holm is in opposition. Okay. That's good. Thank you, Cam.
Thank you.
And then we have item 7.1, appointment of auditor.
On June 1st, we sent out RFPs for the town's auditors, and the firms had until the end of June on the 29th to bring back the RFPs, and each firm was given an opportunity to do their quotes, and then we're given a rate sheet as to how we would qualify our decisions. 5 firms were contacted to see if they wished to be part of the process, and 4 packages were received. And 1 firm decided not to put a packages because they felt they were like just a little too small to be able to do taxes and audit at the same time. With the assessment sheet that we put in place, it was determined that it was council to appoint Avail LLP as the town's auditors for the next 5 years, as they had the highest rating score and the lowest price when we did the RFP for the audit.
Thank you, Michelle. Can you maybe briefly describe the engagement letter that the auditors might operate under, what kind of services they provide, generally speaking, to the town?
They will provide for the audit of our financial statements, of the controls within our financial statements. If we request it, they will actually complete the financial statements from all the documentation that we give them. In instances, council can ask them questions, various questions within, either about an audit or a question they might have, depending on the size or the complexity of the question as to whether we get charged for it or not. And all the firms do it the same way, and they just want to make it like kind of like an open policy with council to dialogue if council so wishes to do so.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions through to Michelle, Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Coaldale LLP as the town's auditor for the next 5 years.
Any discussion?
Just further to that, that would commence right away with that,
It would
Michelle?
be for the 2018 audit, which is this year's audit.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman. All in favor? Okay, and that was carried unanimously. And then we have a public safety update. CAO Hastings, can you introduce that?
Yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of Clayton Ruckberg, our Deputy Fire Chief of Public Safety. He didn't want to wait till September to provide council with an update on what's happening in the Coaldale and District Municipal Enforcement Subdepartment. So he compiled a list of the statistics up to date, as well as a snapshot on some of the initiatives that are planned or forecasted to be planned later in this calendar year. So if there's any specific questions, I think the table and the statistics speak for themselves. I won't go line by line, but it does show you the frequency of the type of files that they're generating. And I think one of the important notes to underscore is the number of proactive files that are officer generated as a result of the patrols that take place. This as opposed to waiting for a complaint to come in and then simply reacting. This is field work identified by the officer themselves, and then they commence the report without having to procure witness statements from neighbors, for example, which can create awkward scenarios. So that's 517 files for 2018 so far. Also an update here from our school resource officer. Sometimes we don't hear a whole lot of what's going on other than from the schools themselves with positive feedback, but here are some specific metrics on the impact that our SRO is having. A year comparison with photo radar. We're comparing what we have to date versus all of 2017. Some of the specific initiatives that we're working on, we are dialoguing with Alberta Transportation on the Jake brake matter. They are loud and they're early and there's a lot of Jake brakes. We're working with them to get an exemption or permission so that we can prohibit the use of engine retarder brakes, Jake brakes, in our boundaries, even though we do have provincial highways that bisect town. That's the reason that we need to receive permission from Alberta Transportation. Should I restart from the beginning?
No, that's fine.
So we are working with Alberta Transportation on the Jake brake matter. It is loud, and there are alternatives to slow down. So we are working on getting the permit in place from Alberta Transportation. Admittedly, that is taking some time, and it's no guarantee that we will receive the exemption, but we are working on that. The Safe Routes to School initiative is going to be in full swing this fall. So you might see some CPOs along with some volunteers on a bicycle helping to make transportation to schools for kids safe on designated routes. CPOs provided traffic control at Settlers Days, participated in tours with communities in bloom. As a result of annexation, we have a number of roads inherited from the county that have weight restrictions on them. So to adapt to our new infrastructure, we do have a few CPOs who have their weights and dimensions courses so that we can continue to protect the infrastructure that's not designed for heavy loads seasonally, as was being done with the county. Bike rodeo, and we have a CPO that's on the fire department. Under districts, this shows you a mapping delineation of the different wards, the 3 different ward or district systems that we're employing. It's been a little slow to get this off the ground, namely because we still have our regional partners that we need to look after, and we have a couple of staffing shortages. But this is what the district will look like when it's in full swing in terms of the enforcement. And the idea is to have the CPO who is appointed to each district to serve also as the community advocate for that area, where they also work as the eyes and ears for that district. And we look at building that into the terms of reference for the new revised public safety and police advisory committee, where you can have perhaps citizens in tandem with the CPO of that area to be the eyes and ears and do some more active foot patrols, because no one knows an area better than a resident who lives in that area. So let's get the insight from them and make it easy by going on active patrols. So that explains the district slide. How's that for being brief? I guess not so brief. But that I'm presenting this on behalf of Mr. Rutberg, so if there's any questions, I can see if I can answer them, or I can pass the question along to him and get back to council in September.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Councillor Chapman has a question.
Thank you. Just a comment and a question. I'm just very interested in the fact that retarder brakes are not part of our standard policy for the town of Coaldale. It seems like that's almost a standard throughout any town across Canada, that the prohibition or exclusion of Jake brakes in town. So I'm surprised that Coaldale isn't included. My question would be about the CPO program, and just a comment that came to me from a citizen in the community that possibly a bike program whereby the CPOs would either go on a foot patrol or a bike patrol rather than just cruising the town in a car might be as effective or even more effective in connecting with the people or with the work that they're doing.
Okay, CEO Hastings, you want to speak to that, or?
Yeah, I think those are excellent comments, Councillor Chapman. That's I think you'll be pleased to know that that's the direction that we're heading in terms of at the brainstorming level. They are looking at getting on foot and bike patrol for the safe routes to school, and I don't see any reason why that can't get expanded a bit further as we get into the new swing with the new model. In terms of the engine retarder brakes, they're not allowed in our roads. It's the highways, 845 and Highway 3, where we need the participation of Alberta Transportation so that we have the authority to post signs and enforce them. And we don't currently have that, unfortunately.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to receive that report for information then. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Okay. And then we have item 9.1. Councillor Lloyd is working in conjunction with Community in Bloom member Marilyn Maxwell to bring forward a brief report from Communities in Bloom. So Marilyn, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Lana will run the slides for you when you're ready.
Okay. Communities in Bloom would like to thank the Town Council for the tremendous support they've shown in the past. We have received recognition in 2016 of our outstanding partnership. It was great to see the participation with cleanup in a day in July. Thank you to Kim and Bill and Kaylin, and looking forward to another work day on Saturday, August the 11th at 10 a.m. Provincial judges will be here on August 15th. That day will start at 8:30 in the morning at the hub. A presentation from the town staff at that time. This is a great opportunity for judges to meet with town council members and Chamber of Commerce members. After the tour, we'll be showing off our wonderful town to see, and we'll meet at the museum for dinner at 6. We will be launching our new book on about the Coaldale communities in bloom. We will be presenting Dave Neufeld, the founder, with a copy of for his vision of the communities in bloom 16 years ago. Council members are invited as well as past CIB members and interested community members. We had a great time with the national judges. It's always fun to show our great town off. We were very interested in our town and the staff, and they were really pleased with the annual report and our profile. We enjoyed our tea and goodies with the Hymans at the Home Hardware store. Home Hardware is our national supporter of the CIB. Some of us will be attending the National Symposium in Sherwood Park in September for a complete report. Thank you. I have some books here if anybody wants to have a look at them, and our profile. I'll send it around for someone to look at. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on the presentation at all? Thank you very much, Marilyn, for your presentation. Looks like the judges are being well treated there. Good. All right. Motion to receive that report for information. Councillor Simpson, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. And I believe that concludes the public portion of the meeting. A motion to go into closed meeting. Councillor Simpson, all in favor? Okay. We'll move to closed meeting now.